Welcome, everybody. I hope everybody's having a good time. How many people did some of the one-on-one sessions so far? Did everybody do some of those? Great, looks like the majority. How would those go? Good, bad? What do you think, good? What I like about this conference, and I've been doing this is probably I think it's my third year with the group, is the opportunity to do all that out on the side, but now it's time for us to learn, and we're all on the same page, we're all from the same area, we all have the same problems, and we're gonna all figure out the same solutions together. So that's what this is intended to do today, is to really talk about these are some of the largest, I think the largest school districts in the entire country, and we want to make sure that we're bringing solutions not only for large districts, for small districts as well. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm a little bit of a homage. I actually started out as a school teacher, so I'm going to interact with you guys a little bit, so make sure you're ready for this. First thing, we're going to get our exercise. So we're going to do some stand-up exercises. What I'd like to do is, how many school districts are, let's say, 10,000 students or less? Stand up. 10,000 students or less. Okay, so you can kind of get a view of who all is here. So we had stay up, stay up, stay up, stay up. Let's go 50,000 students or less. How many? Stand up.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so now we're getting to almost the majority, probably the majority, more than 50%. Let's go 100,000 students or less. Stand up, everyone, everyone. Okay, so we almost have them all. Any on the panel here? 100,000? No, not yet. Oh, yeah. 150? Got one here, Dallas ISD, okay. Baltimore County, San Antonio, correct? Memphis, okay. That's just almost everyone, 200. Keep going, 250. Getting close, 300. More? How many?
More. 367,000.
367, how much?
Yeah. 640,000.
640.
1.1.
1.1 million students. Everybody can sit down. I don't think anyone can beat that 1.1. But it's just a good flavor of who all is here, because we're going to have different people, different areas, but I bet you we're going to have very similar solutions throughout the process. So making sure we're doing that. And I have my cheat sheet here, so you have to apologize. One thing I learned, I also like to learn from the different presentations that were out. So at 8 o'clock, we had a meeting about budget and how that's different for each district, but how it's the same in a lot of ways. And he said one of the main things he does is it's okay and it's good to have competition. So a lot of people think competition, that's a difficult thing, that's a challenging thing, but that's a good thing. He said it's a good thing to have competition because it increases the awareness of other people. It improves your cost and your budgets and things like that and brings the cost down. So increasing competition is a good thing. And we're gonna have a little bit of a challenge in our word study throughout the process. And so this is not just for today, but throughout the entire process, thinking about words that you've thought in the past were bad and maybe turning them into good. I'll start with the word comfortable. Everybody thinks the word comfortable is a good thing, right? We're all sitting down, we're comfortable. We have HVAC systems with making things comfortable. But isn't it also good to have a challenge, which is a little bit uncomfortable? So again, we're gonna be looking at different words and trying to say, okay, comfortable is good, but challenge could actually be a little bit better because it forces you into a new mindset. It forces you into mind shift. And you can now be the change agent for your district if you have that different mindset of how you're using words and how you're using systems and how you're going to the next level. Another word I have, equity parity. We all do that, right? Equity parity, everyone? Okay, but what about the word unique? Isn't that that's the antithesis of equity and parity? But actually we're looking at students and learning systems now, and actually each student in each situation, they're looking to be unique. They're looking to be different from the rest. So now equity parity that we've lived with in the facilities for so long has been such a good thing, now might not be a good thing anymore. Now we have to look at how each system is unique and how each square footage is maybe flexible and able to move to different things. So again, I want to challenge us all as we're going through this process, we're learning from each other. Think about how things can be a little bit different and how they're forcing us to be different throughout the process. Make sense? All right. My name is Khary Knowles. I'm with DLR Group, and I'm based here in San Diego. We have 27 offices across the country. We have 3 offices international. We design all over the place, which is a wonderful thing. But it also brings different challenges. Even as I'm talking to each one of you in our individual sessions, everybody has a different solution. Everybody has a different way. So I have to now think about what's the solution and how can I challenge myself to meet the needs of each of you. My background, I started out as a math teacher, and like I said, I might call on some people in the audience if I have to, because that's the way I used to teach. I actually wanted to ride in on a skateboard, but I wasn't quite daring enough to do that. But I used to be a math teacher. As soon as I started teaching in some of the schools that we're talking about now, in basements and bars on windows and horrible conditions, I realized I had a different calling. And I went straight to UCLA. I got a master's in architecture, and kind of the rest is history. Although I've been building and designing schools for 21 years now, And that's just a passion of mine that I want to make sure that we pass on to each of you, and then each of you passes that on to each of the people that you're interacting with. Our company right now is writing a book. Everybody heard of Rex Miller? Hands up for Rex Miller, the education machine. So we're actually, DLR Group is a partner in writing the new book with him, and it's titled Whole. So what is Whole? W-H-O-L-E. What does Whole mean? Whole is now talking about, first we talked about the students, when educated, the education machine. Now we're going to talk about the teachers. So why in the world would we write a whole book about teachers if we're talking about educating students? Well, they're an important piece of the puzzle. If the teachers aren't happy, if the teachers aren't healthy, how in the world are they going to get that information to the students accordingly? So again, throughout the process of this, we're going to think of two things. We're going to think, one is mind shift of words and systems and operations, and the second one is holistic. Each of you as a teacher, for instance, because if you're not happy with your job, how in the world are you going to build the right canvas for these students to learn on? Right? So those are the two challenges for today as we get through the system. So that's who I am. I'm going to let each panel introduce themselves, and we'll get through the questions from there. Go ahead.
Good morning. I'm Brian Busby. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Houston Independent School District. I've been with the district about 21 years, and I've been in this role this is my 4th year. As he mentioned earlier on the school district sizes, we have about 210,000 kids. We also have about a $3 billion annual operating budget. I have a department of about 6,000 employees, which includes most of the business side except for finance. And we have a great set of leaders that have stayed focused and stayed, kind of mission-driven throughout what you obviously will see in the news about Houston ISD. One of my colleagues here, Alicia Jolivet, who's over facilities, can tell you that. But I'm excited to be here and be a part of this.
I'm Clarence Carson. Excuse me. I'm the Chief Facilities Officer for Chicago Public Schools. I've been here about 13 months, as I was telling Perla earlier, actually. I started October 22nd, 2018. So I know the exact day because it makes a big difference. I am the 6th Chief Facilities Officer in CPS in the last 5 years. So a lot of high turnover. We have about 400,000 students, operate a budget of around $500 million. On the capital side, $1.2 billion, and our overall budget for the district is like $7 billion. I have about, 400,000 students. I have about 3,800 employees, so about 3,400 actually custodians, 3,200 custodians, 500, no, that's not even right. So I have about 3,200 custodians, 500 building engineers, 100 building managers, and about another 100 or so executive staff within that. That represents about 1,100 buildings, which are main buildings, branches, annexes, and modulars, but within about 574 campuses. So each campus has a main building, a branch, modular, and so on, and that represents about 74 million square feet of building space within the city of Chicago. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christos Chrysiliou, and I'm the Director of Architecture and Engineering Services for the LA Unified School District. I've been in this role for the last 5 years. My background is initially was design and then architecture. I wanted to pursue and learn more. I got into project management, construction management. I joined the district about 20 years ago as a project construction manager. So I kind of walked myself through the different areas, and I found myself the last 6 years managing architecture, engineering. I'm the district's architect, and also managing sustainability and energy for the LA Unified School District. We're the second largest school district in the nation. We have over 640,000 students. We've encompassed approximately about 6,500 acres of land, 1,200 schools and centers, and we do have approximately 72 million square foot of building area. So it's a pleasure to be here. It's a great opportunity to share some of the insights that we have managing this size of districts. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Karin Goldmark. I'm the Deputy Chancellor for School Planning and Development at the New York City Department of Education, where we have 1.1 million public school children in 1,800 schools, in 1,300 buildings. Some of the numbers that my colleagues have mentioned, we don't even know how many square feet we have. And my role is actually in the planning and development end. So the district is so big that some of our roles are essentially broken up into separate roles and even entities. So we work with a public authority called the School Construction Authority, and they do all the school construction and all the capital projects work for us. We also have a division of school facilities which works on the maintenance of the buildings and some of the smaller project work. And my role is to coordinate all of that so that we know who's doing the capital projects, who's doing the expense projects. I think I can use the shorthand with this group. And monitoring enrollment projections. Where do we need new buildings? Where do we have buildings that we need to figure out how we're going to use more efficiently? And the program development work that comes along with that.
Fantastic, thank you. And one thing to keep in perspective, Christos, you can correct me if this is incorrect, but I heard a rumor that at LAUSD, Los Angeles Unified School District, and they said flagpoles, but I think they meant some other pole, but by the time you paint every single pole at each school and you finish throughout the year, you actually have to go back and repaint the new one because it's been that long since you've been there and have to come back. Is that about accurate?
It's about accurate,
That's
yeah.
about,
I'll say that,
so
yeah.
Keep that in perspective. Like some of you have maybe 20 campuses, or maybe some of you have 5 campuses. Just imagine going through a process of hitting every single school for equity. By the time you're done here, this one's already worn out and you have to come back and start again. So that's what we're dealing with these numbers up here that keeps it all in perspective. So I'm gonna start out with the softball question. We're here to learn about the current state of our education, our buildings. Tell me a little bit about the current state of your buildings, how old they are, and then also, how are we gonna get over that? How do you succumb that? How do you get past these older buildings versus the new buildings versus, how do you get past those? So just what's the current state of your buildings, and what are some of the challenges that you're gonna have to surpass in order to meet those needs?
The current state of our buildings in Houston is that we have approximately $4 billion of deferred maintenance. We recently went through a building capital assessment in which we had a comprehensive one done that included roofing systems, infrastructure, MEP, everything that kind of helps you plan out what your priorities are by facilities conditions index. And of that, we also excluded our current bond program that we're wrapping up that primarily focused on high schools. So right now we see that there's a need, and I rolled out to the board 2 years ago, there's a need to look at a 20-year capital plan. And out of our 284 active schools that don't include our vacant buildings, vacant properties, we need to rebuild at least 40 over each bond program over the next 20 years, with one happening every 5 years. Wow. So we're looking pretty aggressively at this. We're also looking for next November for something around of a $3 billion bond program, which we're trying to do. The state of our district doesn't preclude us to be optimistic about that. I mean, we're under a state takeover. But at the same time, what we feel is when you roll and package this in the right way, after the state appointed board comes in, we reestablish public perception of what's happening within the walls of the schools. We also lay out, hopefully, a bond proposal that poses no tax increase to the voters, but then also does something across the district. As you know, the #1 issue is safety and security. So we're looking at adding security vestibules. We're looking at redoing all of our elementary restrooms to being all-inclusive restrooms so that a sped parent doesn't have to go to a certain hall to use a certain restroom. So things like that, we're not looking at as innovative, we're looking at them as needs and how we market that out. In the buildings that we've wrapped up in the 2012 bond program, which are our high schools, and the 07 bond program, we really have been able to knock on wood and say that those buildings have held up, they've been sustainable, and we're still maintaining our LEED status.
Fantastic. And then just a side note, you all use primarily in-house for managing all your projects. What are some of the advantages to using in-house systems versus going out and getting consultants to do the majority of your work?
Well, there are pros and cons, and we've actually used both. In the last bond program, we had 4 program management firms, of which 2 remain. I think, and Roy is a pretty good character reference on this in Sci-Fair, but I think depending upon the size of your district, the size of your district's budget, and the size of the capital program really predicates your need to have external program management that comes in does the managing of the projects and goes away at the end, or if you're going at it from a long-term perspective of having a long-term capital plan, long-term capital replacement, you really should look at how you staff in-house to sustain the history and integral knowledge of each project and also the warranty work.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Clarence?
Yeah, I would say on our side, things that kind of describe us, old, disconnected, and in flux. I'll say on the old side, so our average age of our buildings are 75 years old. We have buildings all up to 150 years old. So on average age across the entire district, 75-year-old buildings. Our capital budget, deferred maintenance plan, it's weird to be able to say this, it jumps from 1.8 billion to 3.6 pretty quickly. So if we miss effectively managing our projects for a summer or two, next thing you know, it doubles because those projects are not being taken care of. So the next part I was talking about was, I said old, disconnected, and in flux. Why disconnected? So actually, I remember talking about that actually when we had our phone call. Even our capital program is disconnected from our facility side. So I'm over facilities, and I have a relationship to capital, but those are two different things, how we operate. Not just that, but so internally we have facilities and capital, but because of how we're set up in this other public-private partnership with the Public Building Commission of Chicago, our mayor is the executive director of the PBC, who helps kind of drive projects and kind of, how can I say this the right way? There's a certain sway of where certain communities get projects versus others for those capital projects from an aldermanic standpoint, from just political standpoints. So we have this constant tug of war of how we do things operationally. Then in flux. So we're I think out of this room, I think across the country, we're probably the largest district to ever outsource facilities and management. So we actually outsourced all our entire facilities management program to two companies. They provide all of our maintenance, repair, pest control, grounds maintenance, and snow removal for the entire district. Now, we oversee them doing it, but these two companies, they outsourced, I think we're in, 19 now? So 2014 is when they started. Then the contract finally got signed in 2016 and then 17. So we're kind of an anomaly. So we're trying to always fight to claw back institutional knowledge back from them, how we do things, how our assets are really held, what condition they're really in. Our condition index is kind of fuzzy because we don't keep real up-to-date information. We don't have a CMMS system itself to really kind of manage everything internally. We have all these other technologies. I know Facilitron is here as well, but Facilitron, eBuilder, we're looking at a CMMS system to kind of tie all those together. Like I said, disconnected. So we're working to try to reconnect all that. And I guess I've only been in 13 months, so I've inherited quite a bit. And we're trying to change all that.
Good. Christos?
So our state of schools, if I was just to look at a scale and say, okay, where we are within that scale, I'll say definitely good to great, and we're striving for excellence. And the last 20 years have been quite significant for LA Unified because, for those who don't know, we had a new construction program that we've constructed about 131 new schools in 12 years. And that was to relieve overcrowding, create neighborhood schools, and make sure that students had a place to go without having to bus them from one location to another location. So that was a significant add in terms of adding new schools to resolve a big issue. But at the same time, if you look at the age of our schools, even with that, when you have 1,200 schools and centers, our average age is about 60 years old. And we're moving on to the next program right now that we kind of reprioritize to see how we're going to be able to provide equity between the other schools. And we started a program called Major Modernization. And we looked at that approach to see how we're going to be able to bring those schools closer to a new construction school so you can provide the same learning opportunities to those students as well. And we're just in the midst of that program right now. We're just looking at 24 new campuses that we're doing fully modernizations. We've kind of looked at that approach to see if we're going to do surgically upgrade some buildings or just do holistic modernizations. And We looked at that, and the way that we've gotten there too is because we took about 3 years after our new construction program to do a master planning for the entire district. So we took all the existing schools and we did a master plan for each site to understand the issues, the challenges, and we've developed the FCI. We did the facilities condition assessment to understand what the issues were, and based on all that information, based on the needs that we had, we're able to come up with a prioritization to start helping out those schools throughout. So it's a program that we want to continue and want to provide the best to our students. We're trying to make sure that there's equity throughout, and it's going to take us a while. So if I was to say, how much of a need do you have to get there? When I did the master planning about 4 years ago, we're looking about a need of about $60 to $70 billion. Wow. So, and sometimes we talk and we share these big numbers. It doesn't make us any better or worse, but it's the actual needs that we need to continue maintaining and providing for our students. We do have other programs as well. We do have a critical repair program that it's a response program to ensure that the classrooms are functioning well. Yesterday, you heard from a principal. They have other issues, concerns, so we have to make sure that our schools are always ready for our students to learn. So, so we're doing well, but there's a lot of work ahead of us.
Good, Christos, I want to sidebar. So you had the opportunity to be on the maintenance operations side. You've been on the capital facility side. You're also running sustainability, by my understanding. How do you manage all of those things? But more importantly, and this is probably a question I think all of us have run into, I remember being in front of a board at one time, and we had an issue where there's an older building, and the question was, we have this much money, we have this older building, what do we do? It wasn't enough money to do really what we wanted to do, but it wasn't enough money to go new. So at what point, and is there a formula to where you decide, and the board member said to me, stop putting makeup on a pig, meaning that building's too old, tear it down and let's start from scratch. So do you have a formula or an understanding of, between your group of all these different stakeholders, at what point you decide, let's tear the building down, let's go with something new?
It's a great question. So I have to say that you build capacity through time. So you kind of, in terms of numbers, you know, even if you take an individual just like myself and how I kind of grew within what I do, it's honestly building capacity and have the interest and care to learn more. And you kind of, you increase that through time. So, and we as facilities, we kind of evolved. You know, if you look at facilities 20 years ago, it was different types of facilities. It was mostly geared into maintenance. When we started the new construction program, we've brought external resources to help us out. We've contracted with some of the greatest firms outside. Perhaps we used a different approach in terms of how we design and plan our schools and how we master plan them, but it was mostly, we wanted to make sure that each school had its own identity. It wasn't one size fits all. And we tried to kind of look at how we can resolve that issue by having unique schools in unique neighborhoods to ensure that at least our architectural designs they're fitting within the fabric of that area. So that's kind of, we looked at it in terms of replacement versus new construction. It's always been a challenge. So, and if you're following the state architect and the state requirements, if you exceed a certain investment on your schools, you have to start thinking about replacement, because the new code requirements, even if you start putting makeup on it, you're gonna find out that that makeup, you're gonna continue putting it until you kind of exhaust all your money, and you're gonna find out that it's easier to construct in your school. And that's what we're doing. We're doing this building analysis. That's one of the advantages, to be able to have these groups to look at the approach per building, per site, and just decide what's the best option. Present it, hear back from the communities as well, from the students. We work directly with communities, students, and our board to ensure that we kind of listen to everyone, and then we make those decisions to ensure that we provide, you know, at least in these situations, the best option for our students.
If I could real quick, so I know that at least in Chicago, so we've been shrinking quite a bit. So I mean, we were losing students quite a bit actually through Chicago. Either they're going to charter schools or they were going to suburban schools all around Chicago itself. So we're still trying to figure that out quite a bit. We have a lot of underutilized buildings within Chicago where we'll have a school that was built for 3,000 and has 200 in there now. So we'll have the third floor and the second floor totally unoccupied. First floor is where all the students are. Now, to be creative, they'll have like the science lab on the second floor, they'll have something else on the third floor, which may seem fun for the school, but operationally it's really tough. Because now we're having custodians for the entire building. We can't downsize the staff. We still have to use just as much materials. We're still stripping and waxing, re-waxing all the floors in every space, maybe not all the classrooms, but all the hallways and everything else. And they're really trying to look at ways to bring people back to Chicago. I think our county is expanding with people, but our city is actually losing people. I think we're down another 300,000 or so recently, how that kind of turns out. So things we're trying to really look at. Tearing down buildings for us is really political. Right. Because now, I mean, we closed down 50 schools with our prior mayor. It was a choice that he made. People can have their own opinion of good or bad. Have underutilized buildings, close buildings underperforming, turn them around, whatever you want to do. But those schools were the centers of those neighborhoods. And when you close them down, now you're pushing kids out further, either taking a bus at 5 in the morning, or maybe they're choosing not to go to school at that point. But it's a hard choice to make to close down a building versus the inefficiency it creates to keep one open, where you're paying for all those lights to come on. You're paying to heat up that entire space. You make sure that water flushing continues being pushed through the entire building so you don't have lead in your water and those kind of issues, which is hard on the facility side. But that's that investment, that those decisions that I'll say more on the Brian on his side versus on my side, actually. But we have to make sure that they function and work through them all for that investment.
One of the things that can be challenging is if you have been doing the facilities work long enough, you can find yourself undoing things that you did before. So in New York, there was a period of time where we were moving administrative offices out of schools to create more classroom space. And now in areas where we have underutilized buildings, we're talking about putting the administrative space back in so that we save on the leasing costs where we're leasing office space. And some of the folks who did those move outs are saying, okay, we're undoing what we did and moving back in. And that's okay, because to the point that Clarence made, there's flux, right, in the system. And I'm not sure if this is the case for everyone, but the way New York is, it's so big. We have areas, we don't control where people live, right? So there are areas where we have massive overcrowding and areas where we have underutilization, and they are far enough away from each other that we can't just say, hey, how about you take your 6-year-old from here and commute. Even with a relatively robust public transportation system, it's not really feasible to ask families to go from where they are to where the space is. So as a whole, as a system, we're actually just at capacity. But yet we have, in Queens, our most overcrowded borough, 58% of the schools are overcrowded. So we can't just say, we'll have everyone go to a building where there's space. That's not a realistic option. So we do have to be flexible about how we think about using space, which then goes to that kind of next generation design question of how do we start to design space that is flexible? Because right now, a lot of our buildings, the ones that are, the 300 of them that are over 100 years old, that looks like a classroom. So even if you make it have desks in an office, you know you're in a classroom. And that's fine. Grown-ups can be flexible that way. But one of the things we've got to start to develop is flexible use space, both for students and the learning needs that will emerge that none of us have even invented yet, and from an optimization of that real estate point of view across a city where it's more and more expensive to get new space.
So just a quick raise of hands. How many people are dealing with the word wellness within their school district right now? Just about everyone. That's the term that we have to face. Safety and security is obviously an issue. It's something that we're all dealing with. But now on top of that we have wellness, and now on top of that we have health, and now on top of that there's always new things. Sustainability is another thing that we've been working on for quite a long time. I know in California, I don't know how many people know, but in California there's a 2030 goal of being zero net energy on all schools, all buildings, all everywhere, and that's coming very quickly, very soon. So we have to start thinking in the future of, when we build now, even if it's a renovation, if we build now, we have to think about that. We have to think about what's coming in the future. So as far as wellness and sustainability, what are some of those challenges that you all are facing in your schools? And again, how are you solving those problems? Because on such a large scale, it seems impossible. But how are you facing these new challenges of wellness, safety, security, things like that, with lack of resources and where you are? Oh, start with you, Karin, and go backwards.
Yeah, so spoiler alert for my talk later, one of the things that you'll hear me say later, and you'll hear me say it now, is that none of us is doing enough. And in New York City, we're not doing enough. It's not because of lack of will or lack of skill or lack of interest. It's just the tremendous challenge with respect to sustainability. And I have to say that I think of sustainability in two frames that are related. One is around the infrastructure. So we have a lot of flood zones in New York City. And so when you're making a capital investment, you have a big question. Are you going to build a school in a place that 50 years from now might be underwater? And that's a real question. From the little I've seen of San Diego, it's a real question here. And it's a real question in New York City because some of the communities that have capacity needs and that are overcrowded are also low-lying areas. And so how you build for resilience is one question. And then there's the wellness question and the sustainability question within the schools. So how do you make sure we have air quality? How do we make sure that we are energy efficient? We have a massive solar roofs project in New York City, which is essentially, since we have 1,300 buildings already, any building that's big enough for us to put roofs on, we're starting right away and doing that. Our challenge tends to be to the point about starting the painting and then getting to the end of the painting and starting again. The portfolio is so big, even if we do 50 projects a year, there are 1,300 buildings. So we are, how many years is that, 26 years away? We're still so far away. We're 7 years, we're so far away from reaching every building. And that's where I always come back to, we are not doing enough as a sector, we're not doing enough as a country, we're not doing enough as a planet. So that's a big challenge for us. And I think doing what we can is certainly the start. And then every year pushing ourselves to think about what more we can do.
Now, you and I talked about a certain management style that's coming from your leaders in where you are. What kind of management style do you use to face a problem like that? You know what I mean? It's important to make sure that we're, from the top down, there's some kind of management style to handle this situation, even if it seems impossible.
So, well, part of it is obviously just recognizing that it's not lack of will, it's not lack of effort. It's not that people don't want to do this work. It's that the work is really challenging. So just pushing ourselves to constantly grow, and this is actually something that I really learned from my boss, from Chancellor Karin. If you put developing people at the center of your work, then we can face any set of goals together. So the notion that we are ever finished is not one that we have in New York. It is an ongoing process. And I will say that the way I find government works is we tend to make one set of changes and then stay with that set of changes for as long as we can until there's pressure to change it. And part of what we are trying to do in New York is actually build an adaptive system, recognizing that if we update design standards tomorrow to current design standards, then the next day, those design standards are starting to get out of date. And so we're trying to build in a constant process of consulting with community, a constant process of updating our standards so that we are pushing forward all of the time as opposed to these kind of static changes every 10 years.
So go ahead.
I'm going to hit some highlights because, as Director of Sustainability for the district, I probably can be here and just lecture for the next hour in sustainability. But I have to tell you that we're evolving as a society. I mean, here we are. We're coming here. We pick up some water. We drink it. We breathe the air that we have. But I think what happens as we get to learn more, we're trying to explore and identify exactly how is those things affecting us. You're going to see in the next, soon, and some districts did start already, but the EPA will be raising requirements in terms of the water quality that we drink to ensure that the water is safe, that we have. You're going to see a lot of requirements about air quality. We're going to start monitoring that to make sure that the systems that we use in our schools, they have enough fresh air, and even depending on location, make sure that there's filtration to ensure that the air that we breathe, it's good air for us. So you're going to see a lot of these new requirements coming to us. It's because as a society we are evolving and we're getting more comfortable with other parts within facilities. But in terms of sustainability and resilience, and the climate change that we're dealing with, and it is real, and we're facing it. I mean, LA, we had so many fires recently, and we start thinking that we're going to have a lot more. So you're seeing our emergency centers, our operations centers responding, trying to make sure that we address some of these issues and how we're going to deal with it. There's a lot of different areas that we're looking at in terms of how we can reduce our environmental footprint as a district. And we know that for us, we can influence so many, because we as a district, if you look at 640,000 students, you look at the siblings, you look at the parents, we can reach out a few million people just by sharing at least what we know and what we learn. So we do interact. We have a robust program that is focused in 6 areas, try to address wellness in terms of being environmentally safe, best stewards. So we look at energy, we look at water, we look at, we're trying to understand technologies and how they're impacting us and how we can be able to technologically advance our schools. We're looking at education awareness, how we can work with our students so we can educate them about these things and how they can be able to respond back and become a part of this wave in terms of getting our schools to become environmentally safe and great learning centers for them. So there's a lot of interaction. We're looking at campus greening and how that impacts us as well, the learning environment. So there's a lot of areas that we're focusing on, and we're trying to make a change. And we know that that change doesn't happen with a few of us making decisions or saying you have to do this and that. It's by empowering our staff, our students, our teachers to ensure that they're part of this wave so we can make that change together. So.
Yep, that helps. And Clarence, you have a different perspective of sustainability because yours is more like sustain-able. Are we able to sustain? Are we able to maintain what we design? So can you tell us a little bit about your challenges as far as sustain-able versus sustainability?
Well, I mean, just, how can I put this? So when I try to, anyone heard of like Dave Ramsey before, right? So he would talk about things such as the snowball effect and the avalanche effect, right? Snowball effect is getting small wins up to the bigger wins. The avalanche is the bigger wins to the smaller ones. So you're taking on, Goliath first versus taking on the smaller wins and trying to build up to it. Our approach, or at least definitely my approach I push with our team, is the small wins, the snowball effect. There are a lot of strategic initiatives you could take on the smaller way that end up having a much bigger impact. I'll just go over like a couple of them actually. So rebates, right? So rebates for a lot of either People's Gas or ComEd for us as well. If it's boiler rebates, steam traps, LED lighting, and so on. Those are things that a lot of our facilities departments don't want to take advantage of and they never really submit for. Now, at least for us, sometimes it's too localized. Our building engineers, if they don't submit for it, then they might be doing it all the time. They don't submit for it, so we're just not getting that money back to the district that way. We're trying to make them more centralized now, or not just more centralized, make it centralized now, those submissions, to really get that benefit back to us, to actually put money back into the district. Just like all the steam traps as well. Utility management. Now, this part may sound, really big and difficult, but a lot of it is, some of it's just bill management, right? Just errant bills going the wrong way, getting late fees not waived if they're supposed to be waived, getting deposits and put aside as well, which is just kind of huge for us in Chicago, which when I remember I walked into and found out we had we owed, I'll just say a utility, $3.8 million in back fees. Wow. And every time we opened up a new account, we were getting put into a deposit mode. And I was like, are we deadbeats? Why is this? Well, looked into it, just some weird way we were paying it in the past, and somebody used to give us waivers, did not give us waivers anymore. We weren't grandfathered into it anymore. Somehow it just snowballed, and now we're trying to get a way out of it. But I know that Paul was talking about earlier, trying to get those utility, the energy side put on hold, locking in rates for years. We're trying to look back at all that stuff, because all that stuff apparently was forgotten. Just like I'll say in that utility and the other utility, I won't say which one's which. And also waste management. So I heard something pretty cool actually recently. A lot of us have huge waste management bills, either as inefficiently, each dumpster pull, maybe if it's half empty, still costs us that pull and how it's being managed. A lot of them are getting dumped into by other people from the community. You get your trash cans have mattresses inside of it and all that other kind of stuff. Well, it was, I think it's in California actually, it's a university, where they don't use large dumpsters anymore. They actually use, I think it's the roll-away trash cans instead, and each one of those are weighted as well, so that RFID chip on the actual trash can and on the dumpster as well, where they're weighing each one of those. But now I think it was 8 of those are the equivalent of a large roll-off dumpster, but now you're minimizing all that larger amount of waste that's going into them. Well, we're trying to look into that too, if we can. That's a culture shift, going from having a roll-off dumpster to larger roll-away trash cans at a school, as well as with compactors and so on. But we're trying to change things for sustainability and energy together. Actually, the person we brought in is the director of both, looking at these different solutions and initiatives, and we're enacting them fast. If we can figure it out, test it out, and do a pilot on it, figure out if it works, we're trying to change the district, quickly, and get those reserves, those savings back into the district, back into other facilities initiatives, and doing it over and over again.
Brian, what do you have for our wellness, sustainability challenges? And there's also UX. I don't know if you all know the term UX. It's user experience. User experience is very important now, going along with the wellness factor. But what kind of challenges are you facing in your district? New challenges are you facing in your district?
Well, one, on the wellness side, you have the SEL piece, but then you also have the physical wellness. So we do a lot of indoor air quality tests when we have teachers or parents of students that have complained of, unkept air and how the HVAC systems are not functioning to their smell. A lot of people equate smell of the air to cleanliness as well as clearness of it. So we do that, and then the after action to that, which is we do a lot of coil cleaning, we do a lot of duct cleaning, and then the key to that also ties back to our preventive maintenance. So we make sure that on all air handlers, all unit ventilators, and our chillers for the annuals and boilers, we do a heavy preventive maintenance schedule. The other side of the sustainability of things is we try to focus on right now in the budget scenarios that we've faced over the last couple of years in the state of Texas. We tried to focus on low cost and no cost changes, such as you mentioned the utility contracts. We entered into last year our first of an 8-year contract where we allowed energy companies to bid on us as a strike price. The reason we locked in for 8 years is because the longer you lock in, the more year-over-year savings we're supposed to have. So we'll see, but this year, if nothing else changes for behavioral-wise, we should be saving an estimated $2 million out of our $44 million utility costs. Also on the sustainable side, we also looked heavily at our frequency of how we PM our equipment, because one of the things that will help for clean air and more efficient intake of the outside air that comes into our systems is that we do the preventive maintenance cycles a little more often as opposed to a 60 or 90-day rotation. On the water side, we had a heavy push in the state of Texas behind have you tested for lead. So we had to go in and test all points at the sources where the city side went over, not just the backflow, but went over into our side, a lead test on all devices that kids or students or faculty could come in contact with. So those are the things that we've really tried to focus on and be successful at it. But to Karen's point earlier, if you grab this at a big kind of, I'm gonna fix it all, then you're not gonna be successful at any of the little parts of it. So I think we tried to specialize specifically in the facilities department over what we know are our low-hanging fruit, what we know is low cost to no cost initiatives. And then truly, nobody wants to talk about it because it's not a welcomed addition annually, obviously, but you have to put a lot of this stuff in a bond program. And when you replace, you look to upgrade to a more efficient use of not only the buildings, but then mechanical and electrical systems.
That's a good point.
Oh, I'm sorry. Khary, it was one more thing too. You kind of point out the connection to health and wellness. One, something we're doing as well is AD programs. So, I mean, one of those kind of things that most people forget about. They put in the unit at some point into a box, they go into a wall. You don't know if that physical education teacher still is a trained person inside the school or not, if the battery is still good, if the pads are still warranted or not, if the unit itself is still warranted. Well, now we're actually connecting with our health and wellness department. We actually helped rebid out just recently all our AEDs for the entire district and actually put in a maintenance program because we actually know where they are, where they're located. I mean, you have things where like I think the pads wear out every 2 years, the batteries wear out every 4 years, and the units need to be replaced every 7 years. Well, no one's typically doing that, right? It's the same pads with the same battery, the same unit. We all hope that little red light stays on and be rescue ready. But typically no one was doing that. We may have a PM for our engineer to go by and check it, but sometimes, you go by the box and it'd be like a note inside saying, move to the principal's office at some point, but no one ever did anything about it. Now we actually have that as a health and wellness connection, and I'm looking at putting potentially EpiPens in that same box that's out there instead of locked in a teacher's drawer. Now, this is a facilities side, but we're helping out with health and wellness and kind of making it easier for all the students and staff.
That makes sense. And even as you went through the panel, we heard a lot about, the lead in the water, the air quality. There's all these challenges. I've even heard of situations where bonds have paid for iPads and they got the district into trouble. So there's a lot of challenges that we have out there that we have to overcome. And I'm sure you guys have your PR departments and things to help you with that. But before I get to that question, I want to check in the audience. Do you have any questions? I see a lot of people writing things down. Yes, sir. Go ahead, John.
So I wish this answer were better, but this is the truth. In New York, we're looking at it as two pieces. One is that baseline. We have had for years, candidly, very suboptimal bandwidth throughout our system, and we've just significantly upgraded it. So some of it is just making sure that every school actually has the network infrastructure to support the learning, because asking educators to embed technology into instruction means they have to have that network behind them to do that. And that's just something where New York hopefully lagged behind the rest of you, but certainly we were not up to that federal standard. That's escaping my memory for what that number is, but we've just recently done that kind of basic upgrade, more data, now fiber optic network carrying the data to the schools, and we've refreshed the network infrastructure at the school level. In terms of what that learning looks like, that's actually something that we are asking schools and communities to design with us. So we have an open design process happening right now where we're asking communities to come together to design what the future of education looks like, because we don't think there's this one answer yet. And one of the nice things about the New York City school system being so big is that schools are going to do what they want to do, whether that's for good or ill, but with respect to what the classroom looks like in terms of 21st and now 22nd century learning, we are letting schools kind of bring forth different models. We do, though, have a citywide initiative to make sure that computer science is taught in every school, so every elementary school, every middle school, every high school. So we have a kind of baseline that we set for everyone. You must teach computer science, and we're bringing schools in 100 at a time over 10 years. And then we're letting schools design what that future looks like, because it's not one size fits all. And it's not really clear, candidly, that there's one emerging model that we know is the best way to embed technology in instruction and to have the new model of getting content, perhaps not from a teacher, but from online resources, and then getting help from the teacher. Within that, there's so much room for innovation. So we're trying not to tell people exactly what to do with that.
So, so for us, I would say, just one keyword, it's flexibility. And I would say that any space, if you go back in time, we've done that research to see 2,000 years ago and 3,000, how people were learning. And you're gonna see probably an ancient philosopher under a tree somewhere, and you're gonna see a crowd around him and teaching him about different things. Outdoor classroom, right? So we're developing outdoor classrooms, because that's an area you can expand. And when you have students outdoors, it's kind of it's interesting how they can connect and learn. Classrooms, we looked at classrooms as boxes, we expanded them, we moved them, and we realized that the actual teachers should be able to have that flexibility as well to kind of set up instructional setup areas of what they wanted to teach. So we realized that the shelf is important, but also the classroom space can be able to expand or can be able to change within. So those are the things that we're looking at. So we try to create flexibility in our spaces. We try to be creative in terms of the energy. We're going to be hearing now that with the new technologies like LED, you don't need to be running wires throughout, just like we did in the past. Probably low voltage, you'll be able to provide lighting in your space, for example. So you kind of look at the technologies ahead, and you're trying to think how you can improvise or create something that can be able to adapt into that space. And that's how we come up with new classrooms or new learning spaces for pretty much our students.
I'll just say real quick, small group, flexibility, high technology, but you have those concerns that came out recently, people freaking out on the other side about Wi-Fi and about how potentially that may cause other concerns as well. So those are exactly the case. We're trying to figure out how to do those things while also making everything so technologically advanced, while apparently not doing it over Wi-Fi and all that kind of stuff.
It's interesting to note, I just did a mentorship program for middle school in Riverside, California, and went through the discussion with the students and said, what's important for you for your classroom? They talked about wellness and things like this, and they never not once mentioned technology as being important to them. Well, I asked them why didn't they after they said, well, it's just a part of it. So that's another discussion that we have to start having with ourselves as the older generation of these new kids. For them, it's just a part of it. And so we have to not only be prepared for it's just a part of it, but we also have to start thinking it's just a part of it. Just like sustainability and wellness, all those things are now just a part of it, and we have to start thinking that way. I want to check for other questions in the audience. Any other questions? No? Okay, so I want to go back to how do you get around? You hit this road bump where you have lead in the water or something of that nature. How do you get around that politically? How do you face that and then get past it and move on to your new bond, for instance?
Well, I think politically, it's all wrapped up in one way of doing it, and it's tell the truth. Because you have a lot of parents and community members that are experts in their own minds, experts in the pedigree that they've come through in training, and also in some cases are licensed. But like when we had the big lead push, it was from an outside labor organization. And this guy was going into our schools, taking video and doing a lot of things aggressively that were saying, don't let them tell you different. Well, we never said there was no lead in any building, but it's really about the level of lead that can become dangerous or can become more of a threat. So when you have a story being told for you and you don't get out in front of it to tell the truth about what you've also identified yourself, own the situation and what you're doing to solve it, and also being honest about it's not going to be something that you resolve overnight, but if we work together in a collaborative way, we can resolve this. But you also have to put boundaries on, like I heard Karin say, we're designing with the community. And we went through that with our last bond, and you have to put boundaries on that because you're gonna have people that have no kids in the school that are trying to right the wrongs of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s of when they went to school. And they're gonna try to do that through your bond program or through your initiative that you're rolling out. So politically, you've got to put boundaries in place that not segregate, if you got kids in here, you can come to this meeting, but it says, this is the level of involvement we're welcoming, right? And for the other level of involvement that you think you bring to the table, here's the folks we have that actually licensed that do that. So why don't you give your suggestions to them and allow them the opportunity to give you a product or give you something that says this is what we're looking for as a community. But I in no way, shape, or form say that you should just let a problem just sit out there, hope it'll go away, it'll die down, because in the era that we live in with social media, news reports, Twitter, it's gonna get out there and it'll eat your leadership alive.
Yeah, we have, being in the Windy City, we have a lot of political and economic titans. And we also have a lot of people who think they're also political and economic titans. I'll get a phone call from someone, I still recall that this person said, hi, I'm John Johnson. I'm also on the local school council and I'm an attorney. I said, okay. Are you suing us? Or why did you introduce the attorney? Oh, I just wanted to let you know what I do for a living. All right, so what are you calling about? Well, I'm calling because our grass wasn't cut recently at our school. So this is not even about a legal matter, just to say the fact that they're attorney or that they're connected to someone like that in some way or another. But we get decimated at times by Twitter. I mean, you know, we've just gone through a whole strike recently, 11-day strike, where we made a lot of concessions and changed a lot. And I had 825 custodians who were a part of that strike for that 11 days or so. We had to figure out how to make the whole thing work. But like Brian just said, it'd be on Twitter. It's all these little micro messages that you have to address them. And customer service for our department is really key to make sure our principals or our clients are satisfied. It's definitely a part of that.
For me, just quickly, I mean, really, I think transparency is key. You have to engage, involve, and here we are. I mean, here on this great forum that we're talking about influencing, and here we're sharing ideas. I think nobody knows it all. You have to engage. You have to be able to share the information. You have to be able to listen, and you can hear some great ideas. You can drive innovation. You can be able to really make the change. So there's a lot of challenges in that respect. So I think we can help influencing by listening, by being able to drive that change by active participation of different areas. Otherwise, it's hard. It's hard to kind of navigate through those systems.
Makes sense. Karin, one last point?
Well, yeah, on this question of the politics, we work in government, so expecting people to trust us is probably unrealistic, and that's okay. But what we can do is we can provide the data. We can provide the information. So to all the points my colleagues made about transparency, it's so important not to say, believe us, everything is fine, but to say, here's the information and here's what we're doing. So every time we've kind of gotten it right, it's been, we have the information and we have a course of action that we're taking for every school that's in whatever the situation is. If your level's above 10, if your level's below, you know, whatever we're saying, have clarity of action and clarity of information. We do okay then. Well, when we have challenges, it's when we say there is no problem here, because it's just the nature of the thing. And actually, those of us in our private lives might not believe that of other government actors when they say that to us. And that's okay. It's actually, if you unwrap it, it's okay. It's how democracy should work. People should be able to test us. So for us, it's been information, clarity, communication, and action all lined up together. And if you're lucky, you can set that all up before you go out. And if you're not lucky, you'll be planning it at 11 p.m. the night before. Right. Both ways work.
Makes sense. We'll leave on one last note. This is from our skateboard friend, Mr. Brewer. He says, and this is from the book. Hopefully everybody got a copy of the book. He says, do something different. Ever since I first stepped foot in the classroom, I was coming up with a unique and authentic experiences for students that were relevant and engaging to them. So it's important for each of us as we're going through this process, we're learning through the next couple days, let's figure out how we can do something important, unique, and engaging for the students, for the teachers, and actually for each other as well. We're a very important part of creating this canvas for students to learn and grow in. And so we want to make sure we're maximizing that as much as possible. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. Excellent panel. And